Tonight, hundreds forced to flee Gaza's largest hospital as Israel tightens control. Patients and civilians scramble for safety.
The situation is horrible. It's catastrophe. It's unbelievable. It's inhumanity.
Conflicting versions of who ordered the chaotic evacuation. The clock is ticking on a Pharmacare deadline.
I do absolutely think it's possible to introduce legislation.
The political pressure to remedy the cost of prescription drugs. Plus, plugging away at public charging stations.
It is one of the largest barriers to electric vehicle adoptions.
The drive to give electric cars a jolt.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. Israeli troops are gearing up to push deeper into southern Gaza. It comes as a humanitarian assessment team accessed Gaza's largest hospital today, calling Al-Shifa a death zone and the situation desperate. Hundreds of people, including patients, left the main hospital where the IDF is searching for traces of a Hamas command center. CTV's Jeremy Sharon starts us off.
Desperate and emotional, patients, staff, and displaced families fled Gaza's largest hospital today. This doctor says he and his family were forced to leave.
The situation is horrible. It's catastrophe. It's unbelievable. It's inhumanity. Fatalities in the streets. Children in the streets. Dying.
Palestinian health officials say only a skeleton crew to care for those too sick to leave, and Israeli military forces remain at Al-Shifa. The Israeli Defense Force has said Hamas was operating a command center under the building. Hospital officials and Hamas deny it.
This is precisely the reason why we are operating in the compound of Al-Shifa Hospital, exposing what Hamas has been doing beneath and around and inside the hospital.
In Khan Yunis, Gazans searched through the rubble for survivors today. This is the aftermath of an airstrike that killed dozens. They told us to evacuate to the south, this Gazan says. His relatives who evacuated were among those killed. A strike at a northern Gaza refugee camp killed dozens of others too. The Israeli military had warned people to leave, and today only said they were targeting terrorists. Patients were rushed to hospitals in the south of Gaza, including here in Khan Yunis. This as a ground invasion persists, and Israeli forces plan an expanded offensive in the south in the coming days.
Once they've determined where they think the concentrations of Hamas are, they'll strike them from the air, and then they'll go in, isolate the neighborhoods in order to clear them out.
Now, internet and phone service was restored to the Gaza Strip today, ending a blackout that forced the United Nations to halt deliveries of humanitarian aid, unable to coordinate convoys. Heather?
Thanks, Jeremy. The conflict has led to a disturbing rise in both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia here at home. The Toronto Police Hate Crime Unit made multiple arrests today.
What we see in our city right now is absolutely unacceptable.
Police say a man attacked worshippers outside a mosque with a bike chain, threw a rock at them and yelled slurs. Also today, a woman was charged with vandalizing a Starbucks in a Toronto neighborhood with a large Jewish community. International security is the focus of a major forum in Halifax this weekend, drawing hundreds of delegates from around the world. Conflict in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine, topics of discussion. But as CTV's Tony Grace tells us, so are concerns about Canada's ability to help keep an eye on other threats to world peace.
Former Prime Minister, former Defense Minister.
From a Canadian stage, messages to the world about war.
I'm convinced that we will win this war, but how exactly, it's not yet clear.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak said his country's future is linked to eliminating Hamas.
We have to finish it.
And called the loss of civilian life inevitable.
So we are sorry for any lives that were lost without any kind of making anything bad, but that's part of a war.
The toll of war has Israel under scrutiny, and top military, security, and political voices making pitches to defend democracy.
Ukraine is fight for the whole free world.
The former president of Ukraine arguing his country's fight against Russia also involves a common enemy of Israel, evil.
The initiator of the war in Ukraine and definitely in Israel is Putin, Russia, and Russian acts of evil. Iran, North Korea. So we have the same enemy.
Concerns about China's military buildup are also on the radar.
And the last thing that we all can afford is another war in the Pacific.
And while Canada's top soldier says building alliances to maintain order is key,
if that stability and certainty is not there, our national prosperity is going to suffer.
He underscored hurdles in Canada's ability to help keep a persistent watch in the Pacific. Warships working with the U.S. and Japan are nearing the end of their lifespans.
They are in desperate need of some maintenance. If we take a look at the trajectory of our maintenance funding over the next few years, we're going to have a very, very hard time given the current path.
Defense Minister Bill Blair said today his department is looking for additional funding and is right in the middle of what he called some very important discussions with the Finance Department. Heather.
CTV's Tony Grace, thank you. Tony mentioned tensions with China, and a new report sheds light on the years-long detention of the two Michaels there. The Globe and Mail is reporting one of the men, Michael Spavor, is seeking a multi-million-dollar settlement from Ottawa and is blaming his fellow prisoner, Michael Kovrig. Spavor was a businessman who traveled to North Korea, where he'd met dictator Kim Jong-un. Sources told the Globe Spavor alleges he unwittingly gave intelligence to Canada and its allies when he shared details with Kovrig, who was a Canadian diplomat. In a statement, Global Affairs maintains charges of espionage were unfounded. Kovrig referred CTV News to that statement. China jailed Kovrig and Spavor shortly after a Chinese telecom executive was arrested in Vancouver. The federal government is about to forego millions of dollars as it puts a pause on the carbon tax for home heating oil. A new breakdown from Ottawa's spending watchdog shows what creating the carve-out will cost. CTV's Colton Prail on balancing the bills.
It's more than $1 billion carve-out. New data shows Ottawa's oil home heating exemption means carbon tax revenue will drop dramatically over the next 4 years, even as the rural rebate increases.
It is not about the costs for these Liberals. It is all about the political problem that it presents for them, and it is a doozy for them.
The change means more than $775 million in tax relief in the Atlantic provinces, where the Liberals are searching for support. Ontario sees the next highest savings, but the prairies get little help.
It's a temporary measure that is coupled with, again, financing for heat pumps and the doubling of the rural top-up. So, you know, in coordination with these measures, it's helping Canadians with affordability challenges.
But one economist argues that's not necessarily the case.
It's then a question of who gets what. And this exemption really impacts who gets what.
The carbon tax is designed to be revenue neutral, but Ottawa hasn't explained how it plans to balance the bill, even as the rural rebate is set to grow by hundreds of millions of dollars by 2030. Over half of that money is being spent in the prairies, while Atlantic provinces see less than $500 million.
And that means you've got less money available to share with households. So although it looks like you're getting a break, in fact, the climate action rebates are likely to be smaller, even with the rural top-up.
The parliamentary budget officer says Ottawa could keep payments to households steady, but it would mean cuts to the amounts going to businesses and farmers, or debt spending by the federal government. It's a decision the Liberals have yet to make. Heather.
Colton, thank you. A push from Ottawa to get more electric vehicles on the road is drawing criticism. A new audit shows a national program to install electric chargers is too concentrated in a small number of provinces and many in private spaces. CTV's Kamal Karmali on how experts want the feds to address the shortfalls.
This is one of hundreds of public EV charging stations in Toronto. But leave the city and powering up becomes a problem.
We need more charging infrastructure, and that's primarily because we have a geography that's very, very large.
Welcome to today's press conference.
Last week, the Federal Environment Commissioner highlighted Canada's shortfall in providing an adequate amount of charging ports for the number of electric vehicles it hopes to have out on the road.
The department had not prioritized underserved areas, including rural, remote, and Indigenous communities, and lower income areas.
As of July, the federal government's program had approved nearly 34,000 charging ports. Only about 13% are operational, and nearly 90% of ports are within 3 provinces: Ontario, Quebec, and BC. The audit also found 1/3 of charging ports were located in private multi-unit buildings, while only 18% in public spaces and 9% at workplaces. Although as of now, only a small fraction of the federally funded program's charging ports are operational, the government says the rest will be up and running by 2026. Even then, the federal government currently has no data to show exactly where the ports are needed the most, although drivers will tell you.
Especially highways, right? Like that's where people travel the most. And we're seeing there's pain points and spots where there aren't infrastructure developed.
All of it causing a short circuit in consumer confidence.
So if we're going to get more Canadians to go electric, we have to remove those barriers.
With Ottawa maintaining its goal to have 100% of new vehicles sold be electric by 2035, that number is currently just at 10%. Kamal Karamali, CTV News, Toronto.
The cost of prescription drugs weighs heavily on Canadians struggling with financial issues. But so far, the Liberals have not fulfilled their promise to table Pharmacare legislation. And as CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver tells us, that could impact their power in Parliament.
For more than a year and a half, the NDP have been propping up the minority Liberal government. But that partnership may be at risk due to divisions over Pharmacare legislation.
Right now, the sticking point is the Liberals want to bring in legislation that appeases the big pharmaceutical industry. We don't care about them. We don't want to appease them.
The NDP Liberal Supply and Confidence Agreement says Pharmacare legislation must be passed by the end of 2023. But it hasn't been introduced yet, with negotiations between the parties ongoing and the House of Commons set to rise in 1 month.
I do absolutely think it's possible to introduce legislation. Whether or not we can get it through all stages, I mean, that's another question.
In the last budget, Pharmacare was left out. But an estimate from the Parliamentary Budget Officer says a single-payer universal drug plan would likely cost $11.2 billion in the first year, rising to $13.4 billion by 2027, when the plan would save an estimated $2.2 billion a year on drug expenditures.
Let's take the time and make sure that we get a good system so that we can move forward. We don't want to bring in a bad solution now. If it takes a few more weeks to get a good solution so that we've got something to move forward into the future.
David Coletto of Abacus Data says neither the NDP nor the Liberals should want an election right now. The latest data shows the Conservatives have a large and growing lead at 41%, followed by the Bloc at 28% in Quebec, Liberals 25%, and the NDP at 19%.
Pierre Poilievre constantly talks about the Liberal-NDP coalition, and I think that's to some extent why he's been able to gain some New Democrat supporters who, don't like Justin Trudeau, want a change in government, and it doesn't look like the party they typically support is willing to do it.
Based on recent polling, Coletto says the Conservatives are in majority territory, and if an election were to be called today, the Liberals could be reduced to under 70 seats. Annie Bergeron-Oliver, CTV News, Ottawa.
Coming up, ripe for automation.
We started developing robots to actually help humans, laborers.
High-tech helpers become building blocks for homes. Plus, why we should always be kind to otters. American rapper Sean Diddy Combs has settled a lawsuit with a woman who accused him of raping and beating her.
Last night, couldn't even get an answer.
The settlement comes one day after R&B singer Cassandra Cassie Ventura filed the lawsuit. Combs denied the allegations. And from a launch pad in Texas today, SpaceX tested the world's most powerful rocket. Blastoff looked good, and the uncrewed Starship made it into space, a first for Starship, but Mission Control lost contact and then it blew up. SpaceX has a lot riding on this rocket. It plans to send humans back to the moon and eventually to Mars. The solution to Canada's housing crisis may lie in high tech. A shortage of trades workers is making it nearly impossible for some builders to keep up. That has one professor in BC looking to use artificial intelligence and robots on construction sites. CTV's Shannon Patterson reports.
Ask any developer. There aren't nearly enough skilled trades in BC to meet the demand for new housing.
We're projecting a skilled trade shortage for the next 10 years, and it's not unique to British Columbia. We're seeing that across the country.
While construction companies compete for talent and the province tries to train and recruit more workers,
we decided to go with a new route where we started developing robots to actually help humans, laborers, to actually get the job done faster.
UBC engineering professor Dr. Tony Yang says the solution to the skilled trade shortage is artificial intelligence on work sites.
The excavators, the cranes, and everything you see in the construction site, we started making them smarter by actually adding sensors, AI technology to it. So it has decision-making capability to execute what the operational workers are doing, but doing it by its own autonomously.
In this demonstration, after a worksite is mapped by drone, an AI-empowered robotic crane begins placing concrete blocks by itself.
There's no real coding or computer programming required. All the skilled worker needed to do is assign tasks to the robots.
Dr. Yang insists this isn't about replacing construction workers with an army of robots.
So it's not the goal to replace them, but actually allow them to do job faster, more quicker.
We've embraced technologies where it makes work easier, less laborious, less wear and tear on people. This is another extension of that to help use robotics, use AI where it can fit.
There's skepticism robots can take over complex construction.
There's a certain set of skills and knowledge and expertise that you don't just want to hand over that responsibility to artificial intelligence.
But if the skilled trades shortage continues and AI technology keeps advancing,
then there's going to be certain job sites that would be welcoming of this.
This is unavoidable. This is the way of the future.
And the future is already here. Shannon Patterson, CTV News, Vancouver.
Still ahead, sticking out like a sore thumb.
I definitely don't think we should keep it, but I think definitely we should laugh about it.
But that's not the poll story. This is the biggest weekend in Canadian football, and fans are huddling in Hamilton.
Doesn't matter who's playing. Everyone's wearing their team colors and here for a good time. It's Canada.
The game is tomorrow, but the party has already kicked off. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers will take on the Montreal Alouettes for the 110th Grey Cup. And a U.S. college basketball team has added a Montrealer who's the world's tallest teenager to its roster. Other teams will have to look out or look up when they play the Florida Gators because 7'6" Olivier Ryu will be on the court. Even at his great height, Ryu may not be able to compete with the tall tale of this next story. It's become an unlikely internet sensation from Fredericton. CTV's Sarah Plowman explains.
A Fredericton suburb recently got a new landmark. Not the roundabout that was months in the making, but what stands in it. A utility pole that became, well, a bit political. Neither the city nor utilities claim it, but online, people jumped at the chance. Some joke this was a heritage moment. An injury lawyer said he's grateful for the support. It even got its own social media profile.
I wanted justice for the pole, everybody was coming after it. It was there first.
It was decorated and then made into a decoration.
Oh, I saw the pole online and I wanted to take a photo.
Was the pole everything you thought it would be?
I don't know what to think about the pole, honestly.
The city explained crews paved around the pole to get the roundabout partly opened. and it couldn't be moved until its wires were. The pole would go, although there was a petition to keep it.
I definitely don't think we should keep it, but I think definitely we should laugh about it. And I don't know. I mean, it's funny. People are complaining about NB Power, and the NB Power's like, it's not even our pole. Like, what do you want?
A week on, the landscape shifted.
It's a necessary evil. I mean, really, maybe this could have been an influx of tourism dollars for Fredericton, but I think as a safety issue, we all know the pole's gotta go.
Bringing the area the roundabout they expected, and the laughs they did not. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Fredericton.
A great attraction. Coming up after the break.
It makes me feel at peace, joyful and excited that something this magical can happen in the wilderness.
Nature's best medicine helps others in healing. Finally, for us tonight, a reminder for those who may be overwhelmed by uncertainty during difficult times that simply getting outside can make a big difference. CTV's Adam Sawatsky introduces us to a nurse who may have found the best medicine.
Alone on a log, this otter seems to be having one of those days. Like Winnie C. certainly is.
There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of hopelessness.
There's a lot of conflict in the world right now, and this registered nurse is feeling the weight of it all.
It's devastating to know colleagues around the world are suffering.
That, on top of the challenges facing our healthcare system at home, too.
It can get to you emotionally, physically.
And like the otter, Winnie just wanted to lay low.
You know, when I'm down, I usually like to hide behind closed doors.
Although going out was the last thing she wanted to do, when her friends invited her for a walk along the water, Winnie accepted.
I always find peace being so close to the water.
While it proved predictably positive to spend time here with them, Winnie never imagined they'd be joined by an otter, let alone a whole family of them.
I've never seen otters in the natural habitat.
Watching from a respectful distance, Winnie appreciated how they cleaned and cuddled each other.
It makes me feel at peace, joyful and excited that something this magical can happen in the wilderness.
Seeing the otters transformed her mood so effectively, Winnie attempted to capture them on camera so she could share the pictures with the people she cares for at work who suffer from dementia.
Bring a little bit of light in their lives too.
Like the otters are focused on caring for each other, Winnie has learned that the best medicine for feeling overwhelmed by the things that aren't in our control is spending time sharing the good that is.
Really glad that I chose nature today over staying at home.
Yeah, because look at that smile.
Yeah.
You're happy now.
I am, yeah.
Adam Sawatsky, CTV News, Victoria.
That is it for us tonight. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and we'll see you again tomorrow.